It seems obvious. Government needs money. Government prints money. Problem solved. Here's why that logic ends in wheelbarrows of cash and empty shelves. This has actually happened multiple times in living memory, and the countries it happened to weren't run by idiots. They were desperate, and they made one very understandable mistake. The kind of mistake that feels completely rational right up until the moment everything falls apart. So let's actually answer this, not with charts, not with textbook definitions, just the real explanation, the way it should have been taught to you years ago. Let's start with why the idea is so seductive. If you owe money, you want more money. That's just human nature. If your country is in debt, it wants more money too. And unlike you, a government controls the machine that literally manufactures money. So the logic feels airtight. You need more. You have the machine. You run the machine. Venezuela thought this. Zimbabwe thought this. The Weimar Republic in Germany thought this in the 1920s. Argentina has thought this multiple times across multiple decades. They all ran the machine. And they all ended up in the same place. A currency so worthless that people used it as wallpaper. Literally. Stacks of bills just to buy a loaf of bread. Not because there wasn't enough money, because there was far, far too much of it. Here's what they missed, and it's simpler than you think. Money is not wealth. Money is a claim on wealth. Read that again, because that one sentence explains everything. Think of it this way. Imagine a tiny island with 10 people. There are 10 apples on the island, and there are 10 coins in circulation. Each coin buys 1 apple. Clean, simple, balanced. Now the island chief gets a bright idea. He prints 10 more coins and hands everyone an extra 1. He feels generous, productive even. But wait, are there more apples now? No, there are still 10 apples. The trees didn't grow faster because new coins appeared. The farmers didn't suddenly harvest more. There are still exactly 10 apples, but now there are 20 coins chasing them. So what happens? The price of apples doubles. Each coin now only buys half an apple. The chief didn't make the island richer. He just made every coin worth less. He diluted the purchasing power of every single coin that already existed, including the ones people had saved and worked for. This is called inflation. And it's not a bug in the system. It's not a flaw in the theory. It's just math. Unavoidable, indifferent math. Printing money doesn't create more goods. It doesn't build more houses, grow more food, produce more medicine, or generate more electricity. It creates more paper, and then sends that paper chasing the same amount of real things that already existed. When more money chases the same amount of stuff, the price of that stuff rises, and every dollar you already had quietly, invisibly loses a little of its value. Not in a dramatic way at first, just a slow, steady erosion, like a beach losing sand to the tide, grain by grain, until one day you notice the beach is just gone. Now here's where it gets genuinely nasty, because inflation doesn't just sit at a polite, manageable level and stay there. It escalates. When prices start rising, workers demand higher wages to keep up. Reasonable. When wages go up, businesses face higher costs, so they charge more for their products. Also reasonable. When prices rise again because of that, workers demand even higher wages. And the cycle feeds itself, faster and faster. This is called a wage price spiral. And once it develops real momentum, stopping it without causing enormous economic pain, job losses, recession, austerity, becomes nearly impossible. In Zimbabwe in 2008, this spiral didn't stop. It didn't slow. It accelerated into something almost incomprehensible. Inflation hit 89.7 sextillion%. That number is so large it barely registers as real. The government printed a $100 trillion banknote, a single bill with 14 zeros on it. By the time it reached the hands of ordinary people, it was worth less than $1 US. Store owners stopped pricing things in dollars entirely and started measuring value in eggs, in soap, in anything tangible that held its worth. In Weimar Germany in the early 1920s, the situation was so severe that workers were paid twice a day, not as a perk, but as a survival mechanism. If you waited until the end of your shift to collect your wages, the money you earned in the morning was already worth less by evening. Some workers literally ran home at lunchtime to hand their wives the cash so she could go immediately to the market and buy food before prices rose again. Children played with stacks of worthless banknotes the way kids play with building blocks. Old women burned them in fireplaces because the notes were cheaper fuel than the wood they could buy with them. That is what happens when the spiral is left unchecked. But here's the thing, that's not fundamentally a money problem, that's a trust problem. And trust, once broken, doesn't come back easily. Money only works if everyone agrees it works. Sit with that for a second because it's philosophically strange. A $20 bill is cotton and linen. It's ink on fiber. It has no inherent value whatsoever. It doesn't do anything. You can't eat it, build with it, or burn it for meaningful warmth. The only reason it buys you a coffee is because the person behind the counter believes that they can take that piece of paper and use it to buy something else. The entire global financial system runs on a collective agreement, a shared story that billions of people tell each other every single day. When a government prints too much money, it starts breaking that story. People notice prices rising. They begin to distrust the currency. They spend money as fast as they receive it because holding it means watching it lose value. Businesses stop accepting it or start demanding foreign currency instead. Other countries refuse to trade in it, and once the story breaks, once enough people stop believing, the currency can collapse with terrifying speed. And here's the part that makes economic historians wince. Once trust in a currency is destroyed, rebuilding it is brutally hard. Germany had to completely abolish the old mark and introduce an entirely new currency backed by real assets. Zimbabwe eventually abandoned its own dollar altogether and simply switched to using US dollars and South African rand. There was no fix. There was only starting over. You can print money, you cannot print trust. Now, you've almost certainly heard that the United States printed trillions of dollars during the COVID pandemic. Stimulus checks landed in bank accounts. The Federal Reserve bought bonds by the hundreds of billions. Economists called it quantitative easing, which is essentially a polite technical term for creating new money. So why didn't America collapse into hyperinflation? Why aren't Americans wheeling cash to the grocery store in wheelbarrows? A few reasons, and understanding them matters because they explain the real rules of the game. First, the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. This is an enormous structural advantage that almost no other country has. When Nigeria buys oil from Saudi Arabia, the transaction is denominated in dollars. When a Japanese company insures a shipment from Brazil, they settle in dollars. Countries all over the world hold vast reserves of US dollars just to participate in global trade. This creates a massive permanent demand for dollars that absorbs supply in a way no other currency can match. Second, there's a meaningful difference between printing money in a growing productive economy versus a broken or stagnant one. If real output is expanding, if people are making more goods, offering more services, innovating, then some additional money can enter circulation without immediately causing prices to spiral. The economy can grow into it. The ratio of money to real goods is what matters, not the raw number. Third, and this is the part that often gets left out of the conversation, the US did get significant inflation, the highest in 40 years. By 2022, Americans were paying sharply more for groceries, rent, car insurance, and mortgages. The Federal Reserve responded by raising interest rates at the fastest pace in decades, deliberately slowing the economy to bring prices back down. It worked, eventually, but it wasn't painless and it wasn't free. There is no free lunch. There never has been. Not anywhere in economic history. So if printing money is a trap, what actually makes a country wealthier? Real things, that's the answer. Unglamorous, difficult, slow-building real things. Productivity, the ability to make more with the same inputs. Innovation, new technologies that do things the old ones couldn't. Education, a workforce that can solve harder problems and create more value. Infrastructure, roads, ports, power grids, internet connections that let economic activity happen faster and at greater scale. Trade, the ability to specialize in what you do best and exchange it for what others do best. When an economy actually expands, when it genuinely produces more goods and services, it can absorb more money without inflation because there are more real things for that money to represent. The money reflects reality. It doesn't create it. The United States became the wealthiest nation in history not because it printed dollars, but because it built railroads that connected a continent, factories that industrialized production, universities that trained scientists and engineers, and eventually a digital infrastructure that rewired global commerce. South Korea emerged from the rubble of the Korean War, one of the most devastated nations on Earth in 1953, and became a top-tier global economy within a single generation, not through monetary tricks, through manufacturing, exports, education, and relentless investment in productive capacity. Money followed that wealth. It always does, because money is a mirror, not an engine. So the next time someone says, "Why doesn't the government just print more money?" you'll know the full answer. Money is a claim on real things. Print more claims without creating more real things, and each claim becomes worth less. Keep printing, and people stop believing in the claims entirely. And once they stop believing, no amount of printing brings the belief back. Money is a mirror. It reflects the real economy beneath it. Make the economy bigger, stronger, more productive, and you can have more money, and it can mean something. Try to fake growth with a printing press, and the mirror shatters. The machine that makes the money cannot make the thing that money is supposed to represent, and that gap between paper and reality is where every hyperinflation in history was born, and where every one of them eventually died.
If you enjoyed the video, hit subscribe and click the bell button for more updates. See you in the next episode of Stick Market.